Ever wondered what makes a French woman French? A certain je ne sais quoi? And a lot more. Follow in the footsteps of storyteller Edith de Belleville, a native Parisian who brings to life the hidden histories of the great women who shaped and influenced the France we know today. In each part of this radio series, Edith will take you to a different arrondissement of Paris with plenty of anecdotes and secrets to share. Ooh la la, mais oui. Episode number 4, Madame de Montespan. Who was Madame de Montespan? She didn't always have this name.
No, she was born Françoise de Rochechouart de Mortemart. She was born 5th of October 1640 in Le Poitou. She took Athénaïs the name thanks to the Précieuse, the literary salon. Her real name was Françoise. And she's well known in French history to be the favorite of the King Louis XIV. We are now in a cafe in Le Marais, the name is La Favorite. That's why we chose this cafe in Paris. She belonged to a very great family. Her father was involved with Louis XIII, the father of Louis XIV, and her mother was the Lady of Honor of Anne d'Autriche. So she had a career naturally to the court because she became, at 20 years old, the Lady of Honor of Marie-Thérèse d'Autriche, who was the wife of Louis XIV. But before being the Lady of Honor, she married le Marquis de Montespan. They got married in the Église Church of Saint-Sulpice, not very far from here. The husband has the title, but not the money. That's the problem. So at the beginning she was in love with the beautiful Marquis, but little by little she discovered it was not very nice, spending money on playing games, playing on cards, and not very friendly. So she's the Lady of Honor of the Queen, and of course she sees the beautiful, the gorgeous, the elegant Louis XIV. He's young, he's very cute. He was not very tall, he was my size, 1.62 meters, so not very tall, but extremely elegant, and he was a very good dancer and very charming with ladies. And she's very smart and very witty, That's that Voltaire, when he wrote the biography of Louis XIV, said l'esprit Mortemart, spirit Mortemart, because in the family of Madame de Montespan, everybody is extremely smart and funny. This is how mostly she seduced the king, She seduced the king, of course, thanks to a physique. If you want to compare Madame de Montespan, well, let's say, Oli, who is Inès de la Fressange, the top model. For people who would not know Inès de la Fressange, that she's the image of the Parisian, la Parisienne. She's very tall, she's dark, she's very slim, you see, very elegant. Okay, so the aesthetical canon of the 17th century is exactly the reverse of Inès de la Fressange, meaning Inès de la Fressange in 17th century, nobody would have looked at her because the aesthetic image to be the perfect, beautiful woman, lady of quality of the 17th century, you have to be blonde, you have to have big blue eyes, you have to be curvaceous. Exactly how Madame de Montespan was. Very big blue eyes and something extremely, extremely precious, the teeth. She had white teeth. Because most of people, the hygiene in 17th century was not what the concept, not very efficient. And most people had, when they had teeth, they were lucky enough to have teeth because most of people lost their teeth. And when they had teeth, they were black, because hygiene was absolutely awful in 17th century. So she has white teeth, blonde, tall, and curvaceous. Bra size in more or less was about 95C. Imagine. if you want to compare, for me, she was a mixture of Brigitte Bardot and Laetitia Casta, you know? Yeah, something, sex bomb. Very, very sexy woman. But not only sexy, she was extremely smart. At the beginning, Louis XIV didn't want her because he was in love with the fragile and very, not skinny, but very discreet child, Louise de la Vallière. And he was with Louis de la Vallière for 5 years. And Madame de Montespan arrived and she thought, I want him. I want the king. Because you can imagine all the men had, she was a fantasy, Madame de Montespan. But she said, no, I want only the king or nobody. She had the king. It took her 1 year to have the king in a bed. And what is interesting, and that probably people don't know, or they know, but I think it's important to, because we have the image of Madame de Montespan history. Oh, she was selfish, she was cynical, she has too much ambition, she has a huge ego, she was dry, she had no heart. And we always oppose Madame de Montespan versus Madame de Maintenon, who became the wife of Louis XIV, as two rivals. And we have the image of a rival, Madame de Maintenon, sweet, nice, and etc. The bad girl is Madame de Montespan, and the good girl is the Madame de Maintenon. And I think, well, let's say maybe I'm the lawyer of Madame de Montespan, I'm going to plead for her that she was not like this. The problem, she didn't write anything, Madame de Montespan, and Madame de Maintenon wrote notes. So we have really few testimonies about Madame de Montespan, but she was not so dry, and she was smart and very high knowledge. Of course, she knew her value, so she had pride and she had a huge ego. But finally, she was exactly like the Sun King. They did look like each other. And I think she made what Louis XIV became. It's Madame de Montespan who built the Sun King. Because, to be honest, I mean, she taught him the games of love. Because the game of love, Louis XIV, before knowing Madame de Montespan, he met her intimately in a bed, let's say, in spring 1667, and for 3 nights it was very wild. And you know, if you check the lovers, because Louis XIV had many lovers, but the lover he had before, or the woman he was in love before Madame de Montespan, they're all the same. If you take Henriette d'Angleterre, his sister-in-law, Henriette of England, she was skinny. Marie Mancini, the niece of Mazarin, he was deeply in love. He wanted to marry her, he couldn't because he was the king. She was very fragile, very skinny and slim. And if you take Louise de la Vallière, the same, extremely skinny or fragile, thin, slim. And arrived Madame de Montespan with curvaceous, with shapes, breast. I mean, she had the shape of hourglasses, exactly. I mean, big breast, waist slim, and bottom, a bottom. So he sees a real woman, and she taught him the games of love. You know, before the lovers, I mean, we were not in the bed of Louis XIV, but we can imagine they were quite passive. And she sees a woman who dominated a bit, you know. She has a lot of temper in the life and temper in the bed. He cannot believe he seduced such a sex bomb, you know, such a woman. So thanks to her, he had more self-confidence. He was shy with women before, and we have testimonies of a woman, the sister of Prince de Condé, who wrote, oh, we can tell now, before in the art of a conversation, he was zero, nothing. He was shy, he didn't speak. And we realize now, she said, this lady now, Louis XIV, he can even be funny, and he had art of conversation. Madame de Montespan was the only person in Versailles who did fight, who had discussion with them. So this is how, you know, she was equal as he was. He found not only a lover, he found somebody to be the queen, the real queen, and the nickname was La Sultane Reine, because it's not a coincidence if she stayed 14 years with the king, and these 14 years are the most brilliant time of Louis XIV. But it was extremely difficult for her. It's a tough job to be the favorite of the favorites, because Louis XIV is very French. He's not very faithful with women. He has many lovers. And she knew it, but she did accept it because she knew she was the only one in his heart. And she has a very good quality, and I think this is what Madame de Montespan can teach us ladies now. You cannot only succeed with the physique. If you think, okay, I'm going to seduce a man thanks to my physique, you will. I mean, you can put the man in a bed. But what is the most difficult is to stay, to keep the man. And this is what she did for 14 years. And how she did it. Louis XIV never get bored with this lady. That's something very important, because she was extremely smart and witty, and she was she had a kind of extravaganza. She was doing things spontaneous, absolutely crazy.
Tell us how Louis spoiled her rotten.
Well, he was deeply in love, I told you. But she was also deeply in love with him, because people think she was a cynical lady. Not at all. He was good looking, and they both, they were madly in love. He spent in the La Fête des Amours, the love party of love, he spent like a price of a little castle just for fireworks, the food, absolutely wonderful. It was for the jet set, something you cannot imagine. He was the glorious king, the most glorious king of the world, of the Western world. You have to imagine. And Louis XIV gave jewels, of course, Clany, the castle, which does not exist anymore, and a lot of money. And she was very spoiled. You know what she did once? She said, I don't like the decoration of my apartment. She had 20 rooms in Versailles when the queen had only 10. Can imagine. She said, no, I'm tired. She was very, spoiled. She asked one bear, the animal, bear, and of course the bear destroyed everything. And after she said to the king, hey, look what the bear did. Now you have to change my decoration. And he did. He did. Can you imagine how she was spoiled? Now you wouldn't bring a bear in your room to destroy it, but just to see extravaganza, But that's what he liked, He never bored with this lady. When we think about Louis XIV, the glorious king, we think about the Grand Siècle, the great century. What is a great century? It's the golden age where the French culture was the image, the things to follow in all Europe. People wanted to speak French, the tastes were French, and this time now it's over, unfortunately. And the free words of the 17th century, if you go to Versailles, you will immediately understand when you see the great castle, is discipline, symmetry, harmony. You see this on the buildings, you see this on the gardens, you see this even on the mines, The great century are the great French writers, Corneille, Molière, the great musician Lully. And Madame de Montespan was not only smart and good looking, she was also the patron of the arts. I mean, she helped Lully and Molière. She was extremely, I would say, intellectual, and she had a very good taste. And you had stage musical. Now we think about Les Misérables, the Mise, but at those time, it was Lully who was doing the music and Molière who are writing the play. Like what we will hear is Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme, and Molière, that everybody knows, wrote the intrigue, the story, and Lully, it's the name, La Marche des Turcs, Turkish march, something exotic.
What influence did she have on modern day women? What did she do that maybe changed the course of feminism?
Well, when we think about Madame de Montespan, we have to link her to a movement very important in France, in literature, and even a way to behave with men is the Les Précieuses, the precious movement. There are women in 17th century who created here in Paris, where in Le Marais and in Le Louvre, but in Le Marais where we are now, a movement to teach the men, because the men, the French men, were not very refined and elegant, and there are few women who had literary salons. The first one is Catherine de Rambouillet, and the second is Madeleine de Scudéry, and they had literary salons and they taught to men to be gentlemen, elegant, refined, and they taught men how to love a woman. But it was more platonic, they didn't talk about sex, it was too vulgar, something extremely refined. And Madeleine de Scudéry invited in a book Clélie, which was a huge bestseller, a map we call a map of love, that we call in French la carte de tendre. It's a 17th century map created by love-savvy French woman, reveals the curious geography of the heart. It's exactly as a map in Carte de France, a map of France, but the idea is that love is a geography, it's a country. And if you're a man, you need a map, it's a GPS, not to be lost and to seduce women. And it's very poetical, it's an allegory, of course, and you have a path, and you have on the way, you have the lake of indifference, meaning if you behave badly with a woman, you fell in the lack of indifference, which is not great. And you have small little village, like a love letters village, les billets doux, or the self-esteem, which is good. And the idea is to have friendship with a woman first, and to cultivate friendship and to be nice and elegant. It was kind of a trivial pursuit, a quiz about general knowledge. It was exactly the same, but it was knowledge about love. They were all the time talking about love, very refined. And we can tell that it's even this woman, Les Précieuses, who created the modern French that we know now, because the French in the 17th century, it was the men who had education, not the women. And the men were using always Latin words that nobody understood. I mean, not very clear. The ladies, they didn't have this education, so they used a French more clear, without Latin words. And for example, Descartes, who is the modern philosophy, who created modern philosophy, when he printed his book, Discours de la méthode, Le Discours de la méthode, it was written, he wrote not in Latin, but in French. Why? Because he wanted ladies, French ladies, even the kids, because he wanted ladies understand his book. So it's really these ladies who created the modern French, and we can even say that the first feminist movement, a mass movement, was Les Précieuses, the first in the history of feminism. Because in 17th century is the century of man, and if you are a woman and you want freedom, what do? Now you go in the Starbucks and you have a speech with your girlfriends, with your sisters, with your friends. But in the 17th century, they opened private literary salon, and it's where they took the power on the language, power on the French. Which is interesting that you have the Royal Academy of Literature, l'Académie Royale, created in 1635. They never accepted a woman. You have to wait, only guess when they accepted a woman. 1985. Marguerite Yourcenar. Yes, can you imagine? Yes. Because they knew, the Frenchmen, that the power, the words, is very important. You use words as propaganda, you use for the power, so they say no woman. They did accept a woman at the Royal Academy of Painting in 1683, if I'm not wrong, but not in the Academy, Royal Academy, of literature. Yes, so that's something just to show that literature and books can be a weapon. They didn't want women to use as a weapon. So that's the link with Madame de Montespan and Les Précieuses. Of course now, if you ask to a French man or woman in the street, what does it remind you, Les Précieuses? It will say, oh, it's the theatre play of Molière, Les Précieuses Ridicules. He made fun of the Les Précieuses because sometimes maybe it was a bit a caricature. But it's always easy to make fun of ladies, it's always easy. So me, that's why I'm a bit angry with Molière. Not angry, but I mean, he said, no, it was a caricature, but I want to rehabilitate this movement because I think it's more important than we think. Because if the French men are gentlemen now, it's thanks to us, the Parisian lady from the 17th century, because we taught the Frenchmen how to behave nicely with women.
Now, Madame de Montespan lived to the ripe old age of 67, and she had 7 children in her lifetime. Only 4 survived. Tell us what she was like as a mother.
So first, she had before 2 children with her husband, Monsieur de Montespan. She really didn't care about these kids, That's the father, Monsieur de Montespan, who, by the way, was extremely angry that her wife has an affair with Louis XIV. He didn't care that it was the king. He made a huge scandal. He took the kids and he raised the 2 kids. Madame de Montespan was only interested in the kids she had with the king, because it was a way for her to have more power on the court. What is interesting that Louis XIV could have thought, I don't care about kids, they're not mine, it's your problem. So no, he said he was horrified because according to the law, and still now the French law, she was still married when she had the children. Meaning, if you have many, many lovers and you're pregnant, the father, according to French law, will be your husband. So meaning that Monsieur de Montespan could come, knock, knock, knock at Versailles and say, hello, I'm the husband, I want to take the kids. And Louis XIV was horrified by this. So can you imagine, he changed the law to be able to legitimize the children, meaning that he did care about the children because Louis XIV really loved his children. So that's another point of view. We have a bad image of Madame de Montespan. People say, oh, she was selfish, she didn't care about the kids. You have to think we're in the 17th century. You don't raise your children. Many kids die, so you don't have time to develop love with your children because they die. So it's very different from now. And the concept is, it did legitimize later the children, but the first kids, the idea was to be secret. Nobody had to know Madame de Montespan was pregnant and had kids with Louis XIV. So they had to find a nanny. That's the beginning of the end for Madame de Montespan, as we say, because they have to find a nanny, somebody discreet, educated, and Madame de Montespan made her that it would be a rival, Madame de Maintenon. The same name, both of them Françoise. One is blonde, one is dark. One is very outspoken, proud, and very... She knows she has a good value, she knows she's very good looking. And the other one, Françoise Scarron, it was her first widow Scarron, she's more discreet, quiet, she was born in jail, she doesn't belong to a high family, absolutely opposites. They met not far where we are in the cafe, in d'Albret, Maréchal d'Albret, in Rue des Francs-Bourgeois, in the Marais. And Madame de Montespan, we cannot tell they were friends, but they had in common the same spirit. They liked to talk. It was like a ping-pong game between them because Françoise Caron was she self-made woman, and she was educated, and she was very smart and very refined. She thought she would be a good nanny, and this is what we call, she brought a wolf among the sheep. Because little by little, when Louis XIV did legitimize the children, Françoise arrived in the court at Versailles, and Louis XIV, who loved his children, came to visit the kids, and he saw the beautiful nanny. And Madame de Montespan, she was that's a first mistake. She thought, oh, she's old, because Madame de Maintenon, we know Madame de Maintenon, she was 5 years older than Madame that Athénaïs. So she was calling her la vieille, the old lady. She said, I'm more beautiful. She was dark, but she was still beautiful. And even if she was older than Madame de Montespan, she seduced. Not, she did in purpose or not. They became rival about education. And that's something extremely modern, that any woman who have children and a nanny, when it's a nanny who takes care about your kid, you're a modern woman, a feminist, you work all day and you arrive at 6 o'clock to take back your little babies, and your baby crying, say, I want to stay with the nanny, she's nicer than you, and you feel guilty. You say, okay, what's wrong? He prefers the nanny to me. I'm sure this is exactly what Madame de Montespan had, this feeling, because it's true that Madame de Maintenon was an extremely good pedagogue. It's true she really loved the children she had to raise, the children of the king. And Madame de Montespan, I think she loved the kids, but she spoiled them too much. And so they had fights. I guess Madame de Montespan was jealous because Madame de Maintenon, the children loved her. So little by little, Louis XIV saw how cute and as she was maternal with the kids. And he said in French, elle s'est bien aimée, il y aurait du plaisir à être aimée d'elle. Meaning she knows how to love, and there will be a pleasure to be loved by her. Meaning that when you're a woman and when you want to seduce a man, it's not a bad idea to show that you have a maternal side, because this is how he was seduced. And Madame de Montespan, she made mistake. I mean, she had the temper, and from a temper she became hysterical. She was nagging woman. She became bitter, because it was a tough job to be the favorite. Françoise de Maintenon was quiet, was not shy, but she was extremely peaceful, and he was tired of Madame de Montespan, big drama, melodramatic, nagging, say, enough, I want peace, because he was getting older too, So little by little, he fell in love with the nanny. And it's very common. If you see what happened with Jude Law and Schwarzenegger and Ethan Hawke, this is exactly what happened. They had an affair with the nanny. So be careful, ladies. Don't take nannies. Even if you think they're older than you, cuter than you, be careful. Think about Madame de Maintenon. Exactly. It's very important.
So Madame de Montespan at one point was accused of trying to poison her rivals. Tell us about this story.
Yes, it's a big scandal, and during the start 1680, and people think, historian and everybody thinks she was involved in the scandal of poison. And according to me, I would say I'm a lawyer, I would say, Your Honor, I plead not guilty, because for me she was not guilty at all. It's a servant, Madame Desoyer, who was involved and not her. People think too that the decline of Madame de Montespan started with the affair of poison, and I think too that it's not true, because she stayed in the court until 1691. Of course, she didn't live with the king, because Madame de Maintenon, there is the famous words when they met in the stairs in Versailles. Madame de Montespan said, because she kept her dignity, vous montez, Madame, moi je descends. You go up, me I go down, But so she was not involved, according to me, but it's more or less it's a big scandal and a coincidence maybe with where she was away from the court. She left Versailles and she lived in the convent Saint-Joseph, which is now in Rue Saint-Dominique, and it's funny, it's the headquarters of the Minister of the Army. She was living here. And we don't speak about a life after the Sun King, but she had a life. She had a strong personality. She was extremely generous that people forget, you know. She gave money to the poor orphanage, and she gave money to convent Saint-Joseph. Generosity, because when we think about the Madame de Maintenon, we say, hey, but Madame de Maintenon too, she created Saint-Cyr and she wanted to educate ladies. But Madame de Maintenon, she opened a school for the poor ladies, but ladies from nobility. She was a bit snob, Madame de Maintenon, you think? Madame de Montespan was not snob. She gave money to all people. She didn't care if the poor little girls were coming from nobility or not. She was extremely generous. And she died when she was 67 years old. She left to go on the spa, you know. She had a problem with her health. And she didn't have good relationship with the children. And she tried to be more closer to kids, but more or less it didn't work very much anyway. And she's buried in Le Poitou now. And really, I really would like that people keep in mind that this lady was really a strong personality and smart and witty and, well, good looking. You know, Madame de Sévigné, the famous writer, said she was a physical beauty, a panache. That's a woman with panache. But it's not Madame de Sévigné who wrote it. It's me who said that's really the French lady with panache who was extremely... It's no words. She's my inspiration.
She's your inspiration. And what would you say Madame de Montespan would be doing as a career in this day and age?
Well, it would be a mixture, because not only she was good looking, she was a leader in fashion, and she was funny. I would think she would be curator maybe of a castle of Versailles, meaning I was there before you, so I know what happened. Follow Versailles in my step. And maybe she would write on a column in a newspaper to write about fashion, it wouldn't be how to be Parisian, you know, the bestseller. It's how to be Versaillaise, you know, because how to be smart, witty and good looking, what to do and not to do, to seduce men and ladies, not only men, you know, to be a charming lady.
And that was Edith de Belleville, tour guide and storyteller who is currently writing a book about influential French women throughout history. And together we have created a monthly radio series based on the chapters of the book. And you just heard episode 4, a portrait of 17th century's Madame de Montespan. The music used in the piece was the Marche pour la Cérémonie des Turcs by Jean-Baptiste Lully, a French 17th century composer, and it was performed for the Les Concerts des Nations. If you would like to hear the other episodes in our series featuring Simone de Beauvoir, Kiki de Montparnasse and Christine de Pizan, you can find them all on the Happy Hour SoundCloud page, which is happy-hour-with-Olia. So that's soundcloud.com/Happy Hour with Olia. And if you'd like more information about Edith and her themed tours around Paris, you can go to her website, which is edithsparis.com.